Hello. So excited for today's conversation.
I know, me too. I think this is going to be a good one,
It
which
is.
means it probably won't be because I just like put my expectations up here. I was just sending you a message that I think we should re-record the opening because I'm like, we'll have conversations with. I'm like, well, nope,
Yes,
we just have conversations with ourselves so far, mostly.
exactly. And the other reason that I want to re-record it is that I said grab a cup of coffee, and every week I'm like, if I tell people to grab a cup of tea or coffee, whatever I said, then I should have one, and I never do.
I mean,
So
I would
I
also
can't
like for
say
you to
that.
say grab a San Pellegrino because we've been recording these lately in the afternoon, and it's like, who's
You're
drinking coffee
right.
at 2? Well, some people, I
You're
won't
right.
judge.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I would not say that in a sentence. So that'd have to
San
be your
Pellegrino, yeah,
line.
I know. It
Yeah.
sounds
What?
so, like hoity-toity. Is that a yeah. It's your birthday week and your
It
daughter's
is. Yes, it is our birthday week. I am so excited for this week. I mean, Leos kind of have a way of celebrating for like the whole entire month.
birthday.
And, that is definitely what we are going to do. But this is also my 40th. So I feel like this is like one of the biggest ones that, you can have. Or all the ones with I do all the ones with zeros and fives at the end are
Mhm.
like huge. So yeah, I'll be
And
40
what
and
year
Carla will
for
be
Cammy?
4. She'll be 4.
She's such a firecracker too.
She is. She is.
Yeah,
She's such a 4-year-old already, which
yeah.
is it's kind of like at the intersection of like language and emotion. So
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
there's like a lot of emotion, there's also a lot of language for them to tell you about their
Yep.
emotions.
She
So
can express it.
she
Honestly, it's
can.
like these years, I think like for my nieces and nephews, if I could think back like 4 to like 8 or 9. I love those years. Like I don't really like the baby stage and the toddler stage just seems like a nightmare to me. But like
It is.
this like learning and getting your kind of
Yeah.
personality coming out, I think is really cool.
Yeah, she's still technically a toddler for one more year, I believe. I think through 4 is toddlerhood, but she's kind of like a big girl toddler,
Yeah.
and
I feel like you're
so
holding on to that, the toddler.
yeah.
You're like,
No,
she's way too
I
old.
I am, and I want it to go. Like I kind of can't wait until the. I mean, I want her to be emotional, but she's very, very, very emotional. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Oh
it
my god.
takes everything out of me. So we do have a correction from last week.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
that
yes,
we should say.
yeah. It was my mistake. I do not know who David Bowie is, apparently. I said he was
Me
in
neither.
Labyrinth and Neverending Story, and I merged those 2 films together because I think they were probably kind of popular at the same time. Maybe, I don't know. But David Bowie
Same
was
decade.
in Labyrinth, and he was, like, scary looking in Labyrinth. Do you
Yes.
remember?
Yes, I do. So I thought the whole time you were talking about 2 different movies and that he was in 2 different movies. And
Oh,
so I didn't know, you know,
yeah.
whether or not he was in both. But yes, he was scary looking in Labyrinth
He was scary
because he
looking.
was not in Neverending Story.
That's correct, apparently. And the song that I said, I don't even remember what it was, but it was like mostly a Queen song. And he was just, I don't know who David Bowie is.
Really? I didn't
I
know
could
that
talk New
either.
Kids on the Block all day long.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And
Same.
even REO Speedwagon, like that was my jam.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
Okay.
You went a different direction because New Kids on the Block and then yeah, okay, I'm not even gonna. I didn't do any research to have this conversation, and so that we don't have to make a correction next week, we'll
Yeah.
just keep it at that Rachel had on a really cute shirt last week, and in her attempt to make it known that she knows who David Bowie is, she in fact does not, and
I don't.
here we are,
That's
and
right.
neither do I.
And we came back to an entire Slack message chain of how much I don't know who David Bowie. Okay, well, let's get into today's topic. So this actually, the topic came kind of as an offshoot from the last one, which was talking about trauma responses, and we kind of started to get into some interesting space around what does it mean to cultivate safe spaces, and that,
Mhm.
trauma response is one of the best ways to kind of explore what those are and to create tools to, help yourself when you get triggered, is to do so in the context of a safe space. So that's what we wanted to focus on today. I think this is particularly, useful, hopefully, for clinicians whose main role it is to create a safe space for their clients and supervisees. But I think it's also just useful in, like, what does a safe space look like for a parent? What does it look like for a
Mhm.
leader, a company leader? Different, there's many, even with your spouse or your partner, what does that look like as well? So let's start, Dr. Carla, with a little bit of a foundation. How would you define a safe space? What does it like look like and feel like?
Yeah, this one was a bit hard to kind of conceptualize because I feel like a safe space is something that you tend to feel before you can really like describe it. Um, and maybe there's more like descriptors than there are like, there is an actual definition. But so here's kind of what I'm thinking. So safe spaces are not just like actual like spaces, like physical spaces. They can be people, they can be things, they can be places. And really, what safe spaces do is they nurture a sense of security and respect. And I think one of the most important words is freedom. You kind of like have this felt sense of freedom to be you, like completely you. Knowing that in all of our humanity, when we show up someplace, that includes, who we are, like our identities. It's also our personality. But then it's also like the things that we're not so good at. It's our
Mhm.
imperfections, our flaws, things that, we're learning to do differently. The journeys that we embark on, and those journeys usually are connected to some change that we have to make. Um, and I think that, safe spaces, the actual like term safe space in like the DEI community has a lot to do with, people who are representatives of marginalized or minoritized communities being able to identify where their belonging is going to be prioritized,
Mhm.
where a sense of belonging for them is going to be something that maybe a person or an office or some space. They're usually on campuses, on university campuses, that their feeling of acceptance is going to be something that that person or space prioritizes. So it can be different, but again, it's like really this felt sense of being able to show up and be free, to be who you are.
Mhm.
Is there something that you would add to that definition, or what are all the things that you could add to that
Yeah,
definition?
I mean, well, one thought it brings up for me, you just explaining it like that, is how like subjective it could be,
Yeah.
right? A safe space for one person might not be a safe space for another person, and it sounds like it really centers the experience of the person to determine like if this is a safe space for you.
Hmm.
So maybe I experience a safe space with my therapist, but maybe another client they have doesn't experience it as a safe
Sure.
space for whatever reason. So I think that's really interesting. I was researching this topic a little bit because I wanted to be able to kind of bring some insights that people might not be aware of. And I actually like learned a lot in thinking about this. I came across this one play therapy podcast from Dr. Dennis Thomas. We'll include the link of it. But and I'm going to try not to get too much into like the psychobabble territory, but stick with me because I think this is actually really interesting. And what he said is that we all have implicit memories that are below the conscious level. So those could be experiences that we don't remember on the surface. They might be totally harmless, just a memory from your childhood, something that happened, or it could be traumatic. So it could be some of the things we were talking about last week in terms of trauma responses. But we have them and they impact our lives even when we don't realize it. And it's oftentimes the reason that clients come to see us is to deal with some of those, implicit memories or other things that just might be going on for them. You know, in their mind or in interpersonally. And so what he said, and this is like the really interesting part, what neuroscientists have discovered is that when we are in connection with another person and that relationship feels safe, those implicit memories become more conscious. And I was like, oh wow, that is so interesting. And when just thinking through, I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about my own therapist. I have a individual therapist, and then I also have a couples therapist with my husband. And I was particularly thinking about Eric, my couples therapist, and how he creates this kind of safe space, and how even the memories and the trauma surface,
Mhm.
not necessarily because of what he asks or what he says or the time of day that I'm doing therapy, but simply because he creates a space that's more safe for me to access. So,
Yep.
in thinking about that, the podcast goes on to talk about the fact that it's really important as a therapist to communicate safe space things like warm facial expressions, soft eye contact, an open body posture, a calming tone of voice. And so that way the person's defenses are less and they're more open and present and more willing to kind of talk through those implicit memories. I thought that was like fascinating. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that reminds me of like, the effect of a secure attachment of
Mhm.
like, the person or let's say parent or parents that a child feels securely attached to, they're usually going to act out with the most.
Mhm.
We may see a child that goes to school that's, not doing the same things that they do when they're at home, and oftentimes or that they say at home, and oftentimes that's because they feel safe to do so. They don't feel like this person is going to leave them, or that they're going to, give them a consequence, or there's something different that makes them feel as though they can feel the depth of whatever the emotion is, and
Mhm.
not feel any type or experience any consequences because of it.
Yep,
And so usually the person that they're closest to gets, all of the emotion that they have inside of them,
that's
good,
exactly
bad, and
right.
different.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly right. I love
love
that.
that.
I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about this experience, particularly from in a parent-child relationship. But I was thinking
Mhm.
too about, I just wrote this blog post yesterday on in our the Mondays with Motivo that I send out about the feeling of not ready, being not ready for something that you're undertaking, and I got a ton of responses from it. It really seemed to resonate with people, and it was a lot of young clinicians saying, I'm starting out in therapy. I'm beginning to see clients and I just don't feel ready for it. And I kept coming back in my
Mhm.
mind to this idea of like what Carl Rogers says is the relationship is the therapy. It's that important.
Exactly.
And so,
Yeah.
if I could say one thing to me in the beginning of just beginning to see clients, it's like, don't make it harder than it needs to be. It's just about warmth.
Yeah.
And I literally, as I think back to the therapists I had over the years, it was the ones that were the most warm. And that
Mm.
word just keeps coming to my mind of I just felt safe in their presence. And,
Mhm.
Warren, my husband, we used to have these cute little Motivo coffee mugs. You remember them. And they said things like, setting boundaries like it's my job, psychoanalyzing you as we speak, things like that. And the one Warren came up with, it was like therapist checklist. And then it was 4 bullets. And it was like, lean in, head nod, say, soft yes. It was like, this is a checklist for how, and I'm like, it's so funny that he knows that, like, not even as a clinician. But I'm sure all the
Uh,
clinicians can relate to the fact of that's what you want to create there. And it's a pretty simple checklist of just like
mhm.
engaging with the person and helping them feel like their whole self is accepted. Thoughts
Yeah.
on
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I was as you were kind of identifying some of the, like, basic, I don't know, feedback for someone who's just starting out. Building a relationship, while it's, just as easy as, like, leaning in, nodding, saying your soft yes, um, we are actually taught to build relationships that are therapeutic, right? So, it starts with leaning in. It starts with, this like listening that says, I am seeing you, I'm hearing you. And the relationship also has to bring you to places where this person maybe has never gone with anybody else.
Mhm.
And that's where some of the differences in a relationship with a therapist, or a therapist that's working on, building a safe, warm connection with their client. That's the difference between that and maybe like a friend, or, a person that you are in a partnership with. And so, yes, we do have models of therapy and all of those things, but I think the reason why the relationship is the factor that is most important in creating change is because of safety.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
because we have the tools to communicate safety, even when things are wildly unsafe inside the body and the mind of this person.
Mhm.
And so it really does highlight that, yeah, it's all about the relationship, and that's fairly easy in the rest of our lives. um, in therapy, it's so very hard because of how
Yeah,
unsafe people come, their experiences are as they come into therapy or
absolutely.
seek therapy.
So well said. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I mean, I think, what the research shows as well is that creating these safe spaces and allowing our clients to have, corrective emotional experiences within
Hmm.
therapy allows them to do kind of replicate that in the outside world, which I think is such an interesting thing. I mean, honestly,
Yeah,
this topic feels so much more broad than I think I originally thought about, because
yeah,
how many different contexts are there where safety, psychological safety, is so important in the
right.
family, in a relationship, in the workplace. Yeah. So I'm curious for you. Have you experienced a safe space? Being kind of more on the receiving end of it, either with a therapist or through a relationship, and if so, what did that look like?
Yeah, I didn't have many to choose from, and so I kind of decided to kind of choose between the relationship with my husband or the relationship with my therapist. And so I chose my therapist because it was safer, given that we are, kind of talking about it on the podcast. But I think that my therapist, I've seen my therapist since 2017. And you were talking about, warmth, and that I think my therapist was probably like one of the most warm people that, or the warmest person that, or therapist I've ever had. And I still was kind of very like skeptical. I had just left a therapist that was unsafe for a few different reasons. And I think, as I think back, it was most likely because she didn't necessarily know how to create a safe space for what I was dealing with and what I was managing. And so I think the warmth was something that kind of like made me stick around. But for my therapist in particular, I think what really has, created this bond that allows me to be vulnerable the most is that she supports me fiercely
Mm,
and also challenges me at the same time. So, like, one of the places that I think that I assume that she has noticed is that I kind of feel, in various spaces and various things in my life, infertility, toxic work environments, those are isolating experiences. And when you don't necessarily have or see represented your experience in something, it
mhm,
further isolates you and feels like you're like, managing something all wrong, or there's self judgment and all of that. And I think that her being able to hold both, like, I'm going to fiercely support you, even when I feel like you're, maybe thinking about this um, in a harmful way to you or to somebody else. And I'm also going to challenge you in a way that also helps you learn and is constructive.
mhm,
I don't necessarily know that I had ever experienced that type of relationship.
mm,
There was a lot of, maybe, like, in my childhood there was a lot of criticism that maybe the goal was for me to, be better or to change or to get better. But it wasn't until I realized that a person could actually communicate compassion, warmth, love, caring, while also supporting me, even when maybe they think that I'm wrong or could do something differently, and also challenging me at the same time, that it just kind of like rocked my world. I was just like, "Oh, okay, so I can show up wrong. I don't have to like, do my homework and be the best client." I'm probably now her worst client because I'm always like, no, I'm not going to do that. But she just kind of like shows up consistently. She's just like this consistent force, that is like in support of me. And like, I just, I don't know, I think that that's something that creates vulnerability. And then the other thing with her is that I don't necessarily have to explain my lived experiences as a Black woman. She is a Black woman, but also she is someone who doesn't just take her own experience as every Black woman's experience. It does help that she is a Black woman who's also a mother and also running her business, and goes through very similar things that or has been through very similar things that I have. But I don't think that that's what kind of made the difference. I just think that she is willing to hear my perspective, most likely because she too is someone whose perspective wasn't necessarily, that there wasn't space for it. So she was able to create it in that way.
I love that.
What about you? What about you?
Well, I mean, I think you pulled out some really interesting things there around, the warmth, yes, but then also the accountability. And I mean, like that's what I wanted to share too, was around my own
Yeah.
therapist and that piece of, what I would say is, you know, in the sense that you come in and you're like, I'm going to challenge or like push back on like what she wants me to do from a homework perspective. I'm like, I wonder if I'm my therapist's favorite. I'm probably his star client. And I think for me, what that looks like is being able to say, like, kind of follow whatever his lead is in terms of talking about the things that
Yeah.
he has for me to talk about until they get too uncomfortable. Like, I'm very good at talking about, how things have gone and, what
Mm,
successes I've had and those kinds of things. And the thing that he does is that he notices like incongruence in what I'm saying and what my facial expression is, or the
yeah.
tears that he can see the like my emotion and my trauma often lives right below the surface. It only takes
Mm,
a sentence or two about, part of my trauma experience to have me in tears really, really quickly. And I know that. And so I stay very
sure.
together, and the
Mhm.
things I'll be saying is about how together I am, right? But he can see it, and he'll just gently push me on it and just
Yeah.
say, I see those tears in your eyes, Rachel. What's coming up for you? And I'm trying to like move on and get to a more comfortable, less vulnerable state. And he's like, let's go here a little bit. And what I love about it, and even why I would say it's a safe space, even though that doesn't feel very comfortable, it's a safe
Mhm.
space for me because he knows that getting those feelings out, expressing them, sharing them
Yeah.
with my husband, sharing them with him are like, it's the key to, it would be like less kind of him to let me gloss over things.
Yeah.
Saying, earlier about it's not just about the warm and cozy feeling. It's also like knowing when to challenge or kind of
Yeah.
push, dig a little deeper, knowing when the client's ready for it and knowing what are the things that they are glossing over. For me, it's more like performance based. And if I'm showing up like I have it together, then I must have it together. And him pushing a little bit further there is super helpful for me.
Yeah, because safety is not comfort. At no point did, as we were talking about the definition, did we talk about, the about comfort. In fact, safety is probably much more uncomfortable than it is comfortable, because there's this like vulnerability of, whether it be vulnerability to be yourself, like to show up as yourself completely, knowing that you might mess up, or you might fail, or the imperfections that are, human about all of us,
Mhm.
will be seen. And so, your therapist saying, you know, I see tears in your eyes, and you're doing everything that you possibly can to like make him not see them or to make them not fall, basically is a person saying, I see you.
Mhm.
It's okay for you to be vulnerable because I see you. And as uncomfortable as it is, I think, my therapist is consistently saying, I'm here with you.
Mhm.
And so, to identify that, okay, yes, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be crying. I don't like to do these things. I'm very uncomfortable, but I'm also not alone, is like the epitome of safety, at least in the therapy environment.
Yeah. And also in the friend environment. I mean, I have to say,
That's true.
this podcast was born really out of our own friendship and, the countless conversations where we dig really deep on Marco Polo and share a lot of things, that are going on for us personally. And I have experienced you to be like one of my safest friends in the sense
Wow.
that you do exactly that. You say, I'm here with you, like that's exactly the energy and kind of acceptance that I get from you. You never try to gloss over, like you never try to like give advice and fix it for me, but you always just help me feel like I hear this, I see it, you're not alone in it. You just acknowledge. I'm like, wow, she's a much better therapist than me. You're so good at it.
Thank you so much. And that just like, it makes me feel really good because I feel like the vulnerability that I think both of us have can be difficult because we have both a professional and a personal relationship. And I think that like, we have talked about it so much about the, not only boundaries between both, but also we just kind of like respect both of the roles, that I appreciate that that's what you get from me, because I also get that from you. And I don't think that, especially, I don't know that I've ever been in a situation where I've been had both a professional and personal relationship with someone who's my boss. And so I feel like, you know, to be able to do that with you and have that with you is like, it's different, and it's also something that like really took me by surprise. And it's like a nice surprise every time I like experience it, which is, pretty often because we are on Marco Polo a lot.
We have been able to navigate it well. I feel like there
We
are
have.
probably clinicians listening to this that are like, that doesn't sound good. There's a power differential there. You guys, that's not good. But
Yes, and yeah. I
and
mean, there's both. I think that we can have both. And I think that, I don't know, we do it well, but we're also only talking to the two of us, so maybe we should ask somebody else. But
that is true. That is
I'm
true.
sure
Yeah,
Mike will
we're
tell
like,
us if
well,
we're
we're
not
doing
doing it well.
great. But I do have to also say another kind of safe space that I have seen you create is for Cami. I think you are
Yeah.
very, and I would say even just parents in general are a lot more conscious, in today's world of like kind of tracking how their children are, what's their experience of the world. So I'm just curious, what are some of the things that you do to help Cami feel like she has a safe space?
Yeah, I was also really appreciative when I saw this question on our list, because, that's also something that's hard for people to notice and see, parents doing. And it's, for me especially, it's like the one of the hardest things to do is to create safety for her. Mainly because I didn't get it. And so, to not have experienced or to know exactly like, this is how this feels, and so here's how I create it. It's kind of like having to come about it another way. So, I know theoretically and conceptually what attachment and secure attachment does. I know what, child development theoretically, how it's supposed to look and how we're supposed to create spaces. And then to help and support, emotional development in a child, again, I know that theoretically. don't necessarily know it in practice. But what I do know, and I think this has come out of therapy, is where I don't have it, right? So, what are some of the things that I didn't get that, young Carla is in there yearning for, that I'm going to have to give to myself? I'm going to have to nurture myself through. But then also, what are the tangible, concrete things that I can do for Cameron that will, help her feel, be more securely attached,
Mm,
which then breeds independence, which then breeds, a trust in self. What can I do? So some of those things are, just outright letting her know that every single part of her is how it's supposed to be, that she was
mm,
made the way that she was supposed to be made, and that we're going to grow and learn what all of that is, but that at every step of the way, that this is how she was made. And then going into things like when she makes a mistake, that I kind of like normalize that this is a mistake. This was an accident, you know, and to even like ask her, like, if you had that to do over again, what would you do differently?
mm,
And then the last thing, there are multiple other things, but I could go on for days. But I think the last thing is also, how can she trust herself?
mm.
So like, she makes most of the choices, not just because she's my child and she's bossy, but also because, she knows what she wants. So I say bossy to you, but I would never be like, hey, that's bossy, don't tell me what to do. No, no, tell me what to do. Tell
Yeah.
me what it is that you want to do here.
Mhm.
The way, for example, we're celebrating our birthdays, she wanted to do these things. And then we were taking pictures yesterday, and she goes, I think it would be really great for us to have bubbles in the picture. I was like, such a creative idea. Let's go get some bubbles. And it's so easy. It feels, easy to do that. But it's like really just seeing her, and like to say, how would I like somebody to see me?
Mhm.
And it's also at the same time reparenting myself, and my therapist and I work really a lot on that. But to really just over index on seeing her, noticing the differences in her facial expressions. I used to notice the difference in her cries. I kind of do now, but she doesn't cry as much. But just over index on those things. Just
Yep.
do it as much as you possibly can.
Mhm.
And that's my philosophy. I don't necessarily know if it works, but it's working so far.
It seems to be going very well. Yeah. I
It
mean, I
feels
think
pretty
just
safe.
seeing them, right? I mean,
Yes.
and when
Yes.
is that ever too much? Like, it's not
When is that
it's
ever too
not a
much?
boundaryless piece. Like there are consequences and those types of
Sure.
things. Like there's limits, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
But like I think that you do such a great job of just holding space for whatever she is feeling. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I love the
Thank
comparison
you.
you made on how you use it as a way to like reparent yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's like one of the parts of like building trust in yourself that's so important about safety. Like when you actually feel safe someplace, you can actually begin to take your eyes off of what's happening around you, look inward, know what's going on inward, and then trust that, like, you know how to handle something for yourself, or to get your needs met, or even to know what your needs are.
Yep.
um, I think those are really important things. I think that there's also a lot of like overlap with, the workplace and like psychological safety. I
Mhm.
think that, there are so many different things that leaders can, should, or maybe don't do, or do that really creates an environment of safety for people to show up and, be themselves and contribute what it is. But it's also hard because there are many more limits, in a workplace than maybe there are with my child. So I'm wondering, how do you create psychological safety at Motivo?
Good question. I do you like how I say that? Like I don't know that it's on our agenda. I'm like thoughtful question. Let me think about that. And not
I love
reference my
it.
notes that I wrote out ahead of time. But one thing I wanted to say there about the end of the other conversation of like how it changes you. I feel like that was such a like powerful like example of why therapy is helpful for
Yeah,
people, for not just people who deal with a severe mental illness, right? It's like, if you're worried about creating safe spaces for your children, or if you're worried about like how to do that in your relationships or at work or different things like that, one of the most powerful ways that you can work on that is to explore it in your own self.
experience it. Yeah,
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 you'll be a safe
absolutely.
person. I really like that. So on to psychological safety at Motivo. I would say one of the things I think about is that it's definitely not mine to say that it's safe,
Mm,
and one of the things I was reading about is that it was the kind of the idea of the this is a safe space, like where that terminology even came into more popular use was really from the LGBTQ community. And
yeah,
there's like little, I know at the place I get my hair done is like a little, this is a safe space with the rainbow flag behind it. And one of the things that it was said was, this article that I read was like, stop saying that you're a safe space, because only the vulnerable party can say that it's a safe space. You
right.
can't just declare this space safe. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, I do think that those emblems have like a real powerful purpose. I
Sure.
believe that if I was, queer or trans, like seeing that would be like an affirmation of myself as I walked into a place of business. But I
Hmm.
also kind of understood their point in the sense of, I can't say Motivo is a psychologically safe place to work. Like I
Sure.
have to like work to try to create the conditions for that, but only the more vulnerable parties, which here would be the employees, can tell me if this is like a safe
Right.
place for them. So it can't be one-sided, it can't be, enforced. Obviously, it has to
Hmm.
be like discovered. And I would say one of the ways that I try to do that at Motivo is just by welcoming, ongoing dialogue, by recognition of wrongs, like any sort of like, how can I put myself on the same playing field as everybody else to kind of, everybody sees the power differential in the workplace. You don't have to like overemphasize it. And
Sure.
so, in what ways can I just show up as like a fellow human being? And I gotten feedback before that that's not great, that might not be the right decision, but I feel like it's the right decision for me. It's for me to be the most authentically myself version of myself feels like the right call. And I haven't seen it like result well, I'll take that back a little bit. There had definitely have been times with previous employees that I created too much of a like loving environment that have to make a staffing change, which you just have to do sometimes at a company, came with some more hurt and pain. But I think it was worth the risk. I think building
Mm,
a relationship with people where they feel like they are heard and understood and valued as a human being is worth the risk of what it could cause on the other side, when there's like a business decision that has to be made. These are just kind of just some of the things I'm thinking about. I think also just the work on myself of identifying my own power and privilege, and like how I show up as a white woman, and how
mhm,
I even feel that I started on third base with a lot of the privileges that I have that I didn't earn, and I didn't do anything
mhm,
to like really achieve in terms of just the advantages that are inherently given to white people in our society. So those
mhm.
are some of the things I do, but I feel like it's even better probably for us to ask the team to be like, what do you think?
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and there's I mean, there's a balance, right? And I think the balance actually shifts when the people shift and change, or when the business, shifts and changes. One of the books that the leadership team is reading, The Great CEO Within, and I will put the name in the show notes. Matt Mockery, I believe. He actually writes about conscious leadership, and that there really is this balance that you do have to acknowledge power. You definitely have to say that a top down approach is actually something that you're going to sacrifice things like safety or people being able to grow and thrive into their best self and whatever it is that they're going to contribute to your company. The reason is that people need to have the safety to try some things out, to mess up, to hear some feedback, to know what some of the impacts are that happens when we mess up, and to take ownership of that. And if there is not the safety to take ownership of whatever it is that we're working on, then then it's hard for people to do that, and a top down approach makes it hard to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up because I know I've read that in the book, but I didn't remember it. So I think that was a powerful example of what
Hmm.
conscious leadership can bring to an organization. I also think another piece there is just the idea that safe spaces do not exist without conflict. That with
Yeah.
conflict, the strength of the relationship is shown, and I think that that is so true. I think about even Brene Brown, how she talks about, I think the word she uses for it is rumble, like you're rumbling with like another person. And it's
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
idea of like, we are willing to have a hard conversation. And that is something that earlier in my career, I was just wholly unable to do, like
Yeah.
unwilling to do, maybe like just conflict in general in the workplace really scared me. And I got
Sure.
by just doing kind of what my leader like needed me to do,
Sure.
but I have noticed this with my co-founder Mike because we have had hard conversations in the past about things that we disagreed on, and they are so safe. Like I just feel that unconditional positive regard for him, and I know that it goes both ways. There's so much
Yeah.
mutual respect, and obviously we're never like cruel or unkind, but we can challenge the thought process of the other person in a very safe way. And I think that
Hmm.
that's been really helpful for me. And I don't think that I could do that with a person who isn't also working on their own like ability to be safe.
Yeah. You're not cruel or unkind unless Mike does not respond to your LinkedIn messages to
Then
him.
I'm just like, what the hell, dude? It's part of our culture to make fun of Mike. It is what it is. He's an easy
And to
target.
receive it back.
That's
And to
right.
receive it back. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do get it back.
So, lastly, the one last thing we wanted to talk about was just like how do we create safe spaces for ourselves? What does that look like? You talked a little bit about radical self love last week. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was just in therapy this morning and we talked about this. So it is it's interesting that we're talking about it now because I kind of get to see if I learned anything this morning, before I can actually really reflect on it. But so in definition, radical self love is a philosophy and practice that emphasizes unapologetic and unconditional love for oneself, including all aspects of their identity, personality, the quirks that they have, the flaws they have, and the imperfections that they have. And the goal of radical self love is to prioritize one's well being, their mental health, and their emotional needs. So these are all like really important things that, you know, self love helps you, really work toward. And the reason why, radical self love is there is because you're kind of doing this in an environment where you may not just naturally have the all of the ingredients that you need to
Mhm.
just love yourself,
Yep.
to look and see yourself represented. And so, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be, or to look and like see that you don't make mistakes, or, that it's like a perfect fit, or,
Mhm.
there's so many different things in our environment that communicate that, maybe we're not in the right place. And so radical self love says, yes, I see all of those things. And I see that you're going to have to work to really be good at this thing, or you're still going to fail. But that you can still see what's good about you. You can still identify in your quirks, in your imperfections,
Mhm.
that you have so many good qualities that allow you to thrive. They're going to allow you to thrive. That you, just like everybody else, have a best self that you just need to like learn about. Um,
Yep.
and so, the reason why we were talking about this is because, as I said earlier, my 40th birthday is on Wednesday. And I feel like, of all of the people, the people in my life who are in their 40s, well into their 40s, or have already experienced their 40s, it is this time where you begin to kind of just like, love yourself no matter what. You're like,
Mhm.
yep, I made 40 years of mistakes, and I'm still pretty badass at this, that, or the third. Um, and so there's kind of like this place of being like, okay, I'm done with the self judgment. I'm done with criticizing myself. Sure, there are all those things to judge myself for, or I can choose something like self compassion. It's like exchanging self judgment for self compassion. And like to really just over index on the fact that you are worthy, over index on the fact that you belong, whether or not, again, the environment tells you such. It's radical because you are going to walk as if, you do belong, and then you will, as long as you believe it.
That's so powerful. Honestly, like I'm just going to hear that today because that's really powerful, and it brings up a couple of thoughts for me. I mean, one,
Okay.
I was talking about privilege earlier, and, the aha moment that came there for me a little bit was just this fact of like, I, as a white woman, have been privileged enough to see many experiences of like women in leadership positions or women doing the things that I want to do.
Mm,
And, what would happen if, that wasn't the case? And I love that radical self acceptance. And I also love too how you are creating that for Cami. It makes me wonder because I have experienced this thing too of like going into your 40s. I see in your no fuck 'em 40s. I love that. The fuck 'em 40s. So good. Like that's I definitely feel this sense of coming into my own, like this is who I am. And
mhm,
but I wonder if I had what you're giving Cami, which is like this
mm,
idea from the age of 4 years old, if I
right.
could have gotten to that place, like, at like fuck 'em 14, like I'd be like, you know, I'm already ready to say, "This is me," and I don't know, I hope that for her, you know?
Me too. I do too. I think that, like, there are so many different places where that would be in 100% service of her.
Mhm.
And then there's also, the world that we're in. And so, I the best thing I can do is say, like, I will always show up. I will always be on her side. I will always challenge her, but, I will always be on her side, like beginning and end. So, we'll see. Cause I too have no idea, what it's like. But, I think that there are, yeah, I think it'll be great. So as we're kind of closing out, tell me about how you are creating safe spaces for yourself. And yeah, then we'll tee up next week.
Well, now I'm just gonna like be like double click on what Dr. Carla said. I have to tell you that my friends a lot of times like listen to this podcast and they're like, oh my gosh. And then Dr. Carla said this, and then she said that, and then you made that funny comment, Rachel, but then Dr. Carla said this. And I just feel like you bring all the wisdom to like really all go away from this and think about this radical self-love as an example of this, you
Yes.
know? But you know what I had put down to talk about was just like really mindfully identifying the places, the thoughts, the people that make me feel relaxed, and where it doesn't evoke traumatic,
Hmm.
thoughts. And then analyze what about those spaces feel safe to me. And so I think that that's the kind of work that I'd like to do following this episode as it's fresh on my mind, is really think about those things. And one of the things that I do like about being in my 40s is that I'm more I am more selfish about where I spend my time and energy from a social perspective. Like if there's a
Mm,
relationship that's not serving me anymore, I just don't invest in it anymore,
absolutely.
And
Yep.
I I think that's a form of radical self-love, and just being able to
Absolutely.
say I'm going to be around the people who feel the safest for me right now, and I'm going to invest in making sure that I do that for them as well.
Hmm.
So yeah.
That's
Anyway,
such a great point. Yeah,
yeah.
that's such a great point. And I will double click on that as well because Rachel said something also pretty amazing. Actually, you said, you always do. But I think that like being able to connect to things like, short-term relationships that we had a conversation about a few weeks ago. I mean, you kind of get to a place where you have the ability to trust yourself to say, this is not serving me. I
Yeah.
love that that's something that you can, assess. And so you assess that in the people, the places, the things that take away your time or that you use to consume your time, and you like do that assessment. I mean, that's something that could be done quick. And then you trust yourself to know better, to know best, and
Yep.
then you act on it. I love it.
I love it.
Okay.
So
Well, tell us
such
about next week because I love what we're going to talk about next week.
You love the topic. Okay, I was in
Right.
yoga yesterday, and it was
Yeah.
an interesting one. It's called Fire Glow. It's like 30 minutes of like active yoga and then 30 minutes of yen, which was like really, it was just like
I
smooth and
love that.
relaxing. And we were doing the relaxing part, Leonard Cohen, an artist I do know. I could wear a Leonard Cohen t-shirt. What was his song? I actually don't know the name of the song, but the lyric I think is pretty well known. It says, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And it's a very powerful lyric. It's been used in a lot of quotes and that sort of stuff. But I was just, he says it many times in the song. So I was just like thinking through it and how true that is of so many experiences of my life that, some of the more painful experiences, the cracks in different relationship and things like that have also been the way that I have found like the most freedom, the most
Mm,
forgiveness, the most, introspection, like, really taking the relationship oftentimes to a whole new level.
yeah.
Um, and so I kind of want to talk about that a little bit, but then I also want to talk about the idea that sometimes the crack that's in stuff is serves no purpose that we see, that maybe like it's just pain that's pain. And there isn't
Yep.
like a way to like button it up and be like, and that's what I learned from that. So I just want to talk about that conflict a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want to hear your thoughts on it because I feel like there's a lot we could say about this.
There is a lot. We've already talked about it and we said a lot. So I'm sure, our Marco Polos will talk about it this
Mhm.
week, and then we'll kind of we'll record it next week. This was such a really great conversation. I have really been enjoying all of our conversations, but also as we go along, I think that they're getting deeper and just, really relevant. So if you are interested in hearing those other conversations, this is number 8. So there are 7 others waiting for you on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And then you can watch the video of our recordings on YouTube. You can also check us out every week on LinkedIn Live, where you can see us, kind of having this conversation live. So there's multiple ways that you can see us because we want you to see and hear us. So
We're everywhere,
there we
but we
go.
don't leave our houses, but we're everywhere.
I love that.
Okay,
That's
Sean just
like
told me the name of
2023 for
the
you.
song is "Anthem" by Leonard Cohen.
Oh,
So, if you wanna go listen to it, I said exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go listen to it real quick because it is just a very soothing song. So,
I'll listen to it too.
all right.
Going
I'll
into my birthday.
happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next week.
Okay, see you then. Bye.
Okay.